I left my wife after she got pregnant with her sister's husband. My name is Nate. I'm 34 years old, and I live in the US mid-sized city. Normal life, normal job, normal neighbors who wave and pretend they don't hear arguments through apartment walls. I'm posting from a throwaway. Names changed. I wish I could say this is fake because it reads like a soap opera even to me. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, Rachel, is 33. We'd been together 8 years, married 5. No kids yet, but we'd been talking about it more seriously over the last year. We weren't struggling. We weren't perfect. We were normal. The kind of normal you take for granted until it's gone. Rachel's sister Lena is 31. Lena is married to Chris, 35. Chris and I were friendly, maybe not best friends, but family-level close. We did holidays together, watched games, went on double dates. If you'd asked me who in my life I trusted, I would have said Rachel and by extension her sister's family. And that's why the betrayal hit like a brick. This started on a Tuesday evening in late fall. Rachel came home from work and looked pale, not sick, pale, stressed pale. She didn't take her coat off right away. She just stood in the kitchen like she was waiting for the floor to stop moving. I asked, "You okay?" Rachel nodded too quickly. "Yeah. Can we talk?" My stomach tightened. In marriages, "can we talk?" is either about feelings or bombs. We sat at the table. Rachel stared at her hands. Then she said, "I'm pregnant." My first reaction was shock, then a rush of excitement I didn't even get to control. "Wait, really?" I said, smiling. "Are you serious?" Rachel didn't smile back. That was the first sign something was wrong, because even if you're scared, there's usually some light. She swallowed. "Yes," she said quietly. I reached across the table, touched her hand. "Okay," I said, trying to stay calm. "Okay, we can do this." Rachel pulled her hand back like it burned. I blinked. "What's wrong?" She stared at me, eyes glossy. "Nate, I need you to listen and not yell." My heart dropped. "Rachel," she whispered, "it's not yours." I felt like I'd been shoved underwater. I said very slowly, "What?" Rachel's voice shook. "The baby isn't yours." My throat went dry. I couldn't process it. My brain tried to find the fastest exit. Maybe she meant timing was off. Maybe she meant it was a medical thing. Maybe she meant she used a donor and didn't tell me. Then she said the sentence that ended everything. "It's Chris's." Chris, her sister's husband. My mouth opened and no sound came out. My body felt hot and cold at the same time. I stared at her like she wasn't real. Rachel started crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't plan it." I held up my hand. "Stop," I said, voice low. "Don't." Rachel kept crying. "It happened once," she whispered. "I swear. Once. Once. Like once would make it less impossible." I stood up so fast the chair scraped. My legs felt shaky. Rachel looked up, panicked. "Nate, please." I said, "How long have you been lying to me?" Rachel shook her head. I didn't know until last week." I stared at her. "So you knew," I said. "And you still came home every day and acted normal?" Rachel whispered. "I was scared." I laughed one short, ugly laugh. "I'm scared," I said. "I'm scared I don't know who you are." Rachel said, "I love you." I looked at her and felt something break. Because love doesn't protect you from betrayal. Sometimes it just makes betrayal sharper. I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my keys, and left the house without a plan. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel like it had answers. My phone buzzed immediately. "Rachel." I didn't answer. Then Lena called. My stomach dropped harder. How did Lena know already? I answered without thinking. "Lena?" Lena was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Nate," she choked. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." That's when I realized Rachel had already told her sister or her sister had found out. I asked, voice shaking, "Did you know?" "No," Lena sobbed. "God, no. I just found out. Chris told me he made a mistake, and then Rachel confirmed." I cut her off. "Chris told you?" Lena cried harder. "He said she's pregnant." The fact that Chris told her before Rachel told me made my skin crawl, like they were coordinating damage control. I asked Lena, "Where is Chris?" Lena whispered, "He left. He's not answering. Of course. I sat in my car with my hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold my phone. Lena said, "Nate, please, don't hate me." That sentence broke me because Lena didn't do this, but her life was exploding too. I said, "I don't hate you," I whispered. "But I can't talk right now." I hung up and stared out the windshield, trying to breathe. Then I got another call. It was Rachel's mother. And the moment I saw her name, I knew what was coming next. Because in families like this, the truth isn't the first priority. "Controles." I answered, "Hello." Rachel's mom said, brisk and urgent, "Nate, you need to come home and talk. Rachel is pregnant. Stress is not good for her." My vision blurred with rage. I said, "She should have thought about stress before sleeping with her sister's husband." Rachel's mom gasped like I'd cursed in church. "Don't be vulgar," she snapped. "This is a delicate situation." Delicate. My wife got pregnant by her sister's husband and her mom called it delicate. She continued, "We need to handle this as a family." I said, "I'm not your family anymore." Then I hung up. I drove to my friend's house, my coworker Dan, and slept on his couch like a man who'd been evicted from his own life. The next morning, Rachel sent me a long message. Apologies, explanations, begging. I didn't read it fully. I couldn't. Because the only question in my head was, how does something like this happen once? And I knew the answer, it doesn't. Not without 1,000 small choices leading to it. That's when I decided I wasn't going to argue about emotions yet. I was going to get facts. And the first fact I needed was whether Rachel was telling the truth about once. Because if I was going to leave, I needed to leave with reality, not confusion. So I asked for one thing, her phone. And she refused. Which told me everything. The next morning, I woke up on Dan's couch with that heavy, unreal feeling like I was still dreaming, and any second I'd wake up in my own bed, with Rachel making coffee, and none of this would exist. Then I looked at my phone. 31 notifications. Texts from Rachel, missed calls from her mom, a few messages from Lena, one voicemail from an unknown number that I didn't have the courage to open yet because I already knew it was either Chris or someone defending him. Rachel's messages were a wave. "I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. It was one time. Please come home. You're my husband. Don't do this to us." That last one made my jaw clench. Don't do this to us. Like I was the one breaking the marriage. Dan made coffee and didn't ask questions. He just said, "You can stay as long as you need." I nodded, throat tight, and finally listened to the voicemail from the unknown number. It was Chris. His voice sounded calm, which made me feel physically sick. "Nate," he said, "I need to talk to you man to man. This is complicated. I'm sorry. Call me." Complicated. That word felt like a slap. I didn't call him back. I texted one line. "Do not contact me. Contact my attorney when I have one." It was a bluff I didn't have an attorney yet, but I needed to create a boundary fast. People like Chris thrive in talk it out privately, spaces where they can manipulate tone and deny later. Then Rachel called again. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent her one message. "I need facts, not explanations. If you want any chance of a civil separation, I need full honesty and documentation. I'm not coming home today." Rachel replied within seconds, "Please. I'm scared." I stared at that, feeling my anger mix with something else, pity maybe. But pity doesn't undo betrayal. I said, "I need your phone and your timeline. When did it start? How many times? Where?" Rachel responded, "It didn't start. It happened once." I wrote, "Then giving me your phone shouldn't be a problem." 3 dots, appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally she wrote, "No. I'm not doing that." My stomach dropped, even though I expected it. That refusal wasn't privacy, it was evidence management. I told Dan, "She won't hand over her phone." Dan, who is not emotionally invested, said the obvious, "Because she's lying." I nodded. At noon, Lena texted me, "Can we meet? Please. I need to explain." I hesitated. Lena was a victim too, but I also didn't trust anything in that family system right now. Still, I felt like I owed Lena the respect of hearing her out. She didn't choose this. We met at a quiet cafe. Lena arrived looking like she hadn't slept, hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes puffy. She sat down and immediately started crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." I kept my voice low. "Did you know?" I asked again. "No," she insisted. "I swear I didn't. Chris told me last night." "Why did he tell you before Rachel told me?" I asked. Lena's jaw tightened. "Because he wanted to control it," she said bitterly. "He told me he made a mistake, and that Rachel was pregnant, and that he didn't know what to do." I felt my stomach twist. "So he confessed to you like he was the victim," I said. Lena nodded, tears falling. "Yes." Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "He told me you might react badly and that Rachel is fragile." So they were already laying groundwork. Nate is unstable. Rachel is delicate. The classic, make the betrayed person look dangerous move. I asked, "Where is Chris now?" Lena laughed without humor. "He's staying with a friend. He won't tell me where." "Has he contacted you?" I asked. "Only to say he loves me and that he's sorry," she said. "Like that fixes anything." I took a slow breath. "Lena, do you believe it was once?" Lena's face crumpled. She stared down at her coffee cup for a long moment. "No," she whispered. "I don't." That answer felt like a punch and relief at the same time, confirmation I wasn't crazy. Lena wiped her face and said, "There were signs. He was weird around her for months. He'd volunteer to drop something off at your place. He'd take calls outside. He'd get defensive if I asked." I clenched my jaw. "And Rachel?" Lena hesitated. "Rachel has been distant," she admitted. "She would come over and act normal, but she'd avoid looking at me sometimes. I thought she was stressed." I sat back, feeling the weight of it. Lena leaned forward and whispered, "My mom is telling me to forgive him." I stared at her. "What?" Lena nodded, furious. "She says we can't ruin two families over one mistake." I almost laughed. Two families were already ruined. The only question was whether the liars would be allowed to keep pretending. Lena said, "And she's also telling Rachel you'll come around if she cries enough." I felt something harden. "I'm not coming around," I said quietly. Lena nodded, eyes wet. "I don't want you to," she said. I don't know what to do." I told Lena something I meant. "You don't have to decide today, but don't protect them by staying silent." Lena swallowed. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if they make me the villain?" I looked at her and realized we were both trapped in the same system. Different roles, same pressure. Keep the peace. Don't embarrass the family. Let the wrong people stay comfortable. I said, "They will try," I told her, "which is why we need receipts." Lena flinched. "Receipts?" I nodded. "Messages, timeline, anything," I said, "because they're already rewriting." Lena looked down, thinking. Then she said, very quietly, "I can access Chris's iPad. He left it synced to our account." My stomach tightened. "Are you sure?" Lena nodded. "He's careless when he thinks he's in control." We sat there staring at each other, both realizing what this meant. There might be proof beyond he said, she said. That night, Lena texted me. I found messages. My heart started pounding. She said, "It wasn't once." I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then she sent the screenshots. They were texts between Chris and Rachel, not explicit, no graphic details, but clear enough. Planning meetups. Cover stories. "Your sister is asleep. Nate believes you. We have to be careful." And one line that made me feel physically sick. Chris wrote, "Once she's pregnant, it'll force a decision." Force a decision. Like a pregnancy was a lever. Like my life and Lena's life were chess pieces. Lena wrote, "My mom says don't show anyone. She says it'll destroy the family." I typed back, hands shaking. "They already destroyed it. We're just revealing it." And that's when I decided. I wasn't going to be pulled into a quiet, shame-filled cover-up. If Rachel wanted to keep lying, she could. But I was going to leave with the truth in my hands. And I was going to make sure no one could paint me as the villain for refusing to stay. Because the next step was obvious. Rachel's family would demand I support her pregnancy because it's not the baby's fault. And they'd use that phrase to trap me. So I needed a lawyer. And I needed to move fast before the story turned into Nate abandoned a pregnant wife. Because that's the narrative they were already preparing. I didn't sleep after Lena sent me the screenshots. I kept reopening them like my brain was trying to find a loophole, some alternative explanation, some missing context that would make it less real. There wasn't. The messages weren't romantic. They were logistical, cold, efficient. The kind of conversation you have when you're doing something wrong and you're more focused on not getting caught than on feelings. The line that haunted me most was the one about pregnancy forcing a decision. Because it meant this wasn't only betrayal, it was calculation. The next morning, I asked Dan if he could take a long lunch break and come with me to our house to pick up essentials. Not because I needed a bodyguard, but because I needed a witness. Someone calm. Someone not emotionally tangled in the family web. Dan said, "Absolutely." Before we went, I texted Rachel, "I'm coming by at 2 p.m. to get my things. I want to speak for 10 minutes. Don't bring anyone." Rachel replied, "Please come alone." I stared at that and felt my skin crawl. I wrote back, "No, I'm bringing a friend." She didn't respond. At 2 p.m., Dan and I pulled into the driveway. Seeing my own house felt surreal, like walking past your old life in a museum. Rachel opened the door before I even knocked. She looked like she hadn't slept, puffy eyes, hair messy, wearing one of my sweatshirts. She tried to step forward for a hug. I stepped back. Rachel flinched like I'd slapped her. "Please," she whispered. "Can we talk privately?" Dan stood slightly behind me, arms crossed, neutral. Rachel's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. I said, "We talk here." "In the living room." Rachel nodded quickly, too quickly. We sat. Rachel kept wringing her hands. The house smelled like the candles she always lit when she wanted things to feel calm. I didn't want calm. I wanted truth. I pulled out my phone and said, "I've seen the messages." Rachel went white. "What messages?" she whispered, as if she could still play dumb. I stared at her. "The messages between you and Chris," I said. "Lena has them." Rachel's whole body seemed to sag, like the fight drained out of her in 1 second. She started crying, "Nate, please." I didn't raise my voice. I said very slowly, "It wasn't once." Rachel covered her face and sobbed harder. Dan looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. Rachel choked out, "I didn't know he'd been messaging her." I cut in. "Stop," I said. "Don't blame Shift. This is you." Rachel shook her head violently. "It started when you and I were fighting," she blurted. "He was there. He listened. I felt my jaw tighten. "We weren't fighting," I said. "We were tired. That's not an excuse." Rachel whispered, "I know." I opened the screenshot with the pregnancy line and held it up. "Explain this," I said. Rachel looked at it and went silent. Then she whispered, He said if I got pregnant, you'd have to forgive me." My stomach dropped. "So you used a pregnancy as a strategy," I said. Rachel flinched. "No," she cried. I didn't think it would happen." I stared at her, feeling that cold clarity again. "You didn't think," I said. "That's the problem. You didn't think about me, or Lena, or the baby, or anything except what you wanted." Rachel reached toward me. "I'm sorry," she said, voice breaking. "I hate myself." I leaned back. "Self-hate doesn't fix what you did," I said. Then I asked the question that mattered most, because it determined the rest of my life. "How far along are you?" Rachel swallowed. 9 weeks. 9 weeks. Long enough to lie, long enough to plan, long enough for whole conversations to exist behind my back. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "I'm filing for divorce." Rachel's eyes widened, like she still believed there was negotiation. "You can't," she whispered. I almost laughed. "I can," I said. Rachel sobbed. "What about the baby?" That question, "what about the baby," was the trap I'd been expecting, because it turns the betrayed spouse into the villain in one sentence. I said carefully, "The baby deserves stability. That doesn't mean I'm obligated to stay married to you." Rachel whispered, "You're going to abandon me." I looked at her and said, "You abandoned me first." Then she said, desperate, "We can fix this. Therapy, counseling, anything." I didn't respond emotionally. I said, "I need you to answer one more thing. Are you still seeing him?" Rachel shook her head. "No," she whispered. "He ended it. I stared. He ended it, I repeated. Rachel nodded, crying. He said he couldn't leave Lena. He said he made a mistake. He said, I cut her off. So he used you, got you pregnant, and then ran back to his wife. Rachel's face crumpled. I'm so stupid. I stood up. Yes, I said. You were. Dan inhaled sharply, like he wasn't expecting me to be that blunt. But I wasn't doing politeness anymore. Politeness is how people like Rachel and Chris survive, because everyone is too kind to name what happened. I walked to the bedroom and started grabbing essentials: clothes, laptop, documents. Rachel followed me, pleading, crying, trying to touch my arm. Nate, please. I turned and said calmly, do not touch me. She froze. That night, I moved the rest of my things out with Dan and changed my direct deposit at work. I met my attorney the next morning. And of course, the family reaction came fast. Rachel's mom called me and said, you need to think about the baby. I said, it's not my baby. She paused, then snapped. Don't be cruel, it's an innocent child. I replied, yes, and it also has a father. Rachel's mom said, Chris isn't stepping up. Lena kicked him out. He's spiraling. Rachel needs support. I felt anger rise. So your solution is me, I said. The betrayed husband, the convenient adult. Rachel's mom started crying. You're heartless, she said. I hung up. Then Rachel's dad texted, be a man. That message almost made me laugh. Because what they meant by be a man was eat the betrayal quietly so we don't have to deal with shame. Lena called me, voice shaking. My mom is pressuring me to forgive Chris, she said. She says if I don't, I'll be breaking the family. I said, they're trying to make the wrong people comfortable. Lena whispered, he's blaming you. My stomach dropped. Me? Lena said, he told everyone you and Rachel were distant, and that's why it happened. He said you didn't pay attention to her. There it was, the narrative shift. If Chris could spread blame, he could reduce consequences. I asked Lena, do you still have the screenshots? Yes, she said. I said, save everything. Don't argue. Don't explain. Document. Then I did something I hadn't wanted to do. I sent one email to both families. Not a long rant, not emotional, just a boundary and a fact. Rachel is pregnant with Chris's child. I am filing for divorce. I will not be discussing reconciliation. Please do not contact me to pressure me into supporting a situation I did not create. Then I blocked numbers. Within an hour, my phone buzzed from another unknown number. It was Chris. He wrote, "Can we talk? I'm sorry, I never meant for it to go this far." I stared at the message, feeling my hands go cold. Because he said it, like it was an accident, like my life exploding was weather. I didn't respond. Then he sent another message. "If you expose me, I'll expose you." Expose me? I hadn't done anything. Unless he was planning to lie. And that's when I realized this story still had one more turn left. Because cheaters don't just betray. When cornered, they weaponize reputation. And I was about to find out what Chris was willing to say to save himself. Chris's "if you expose me, I'll expose you" text sat in my phone like a ticking bomb. For a few minutes, I just stared at it, trying to understand what angle he could possibly take. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't hit anyone. I hadn't done anything except get betrayed. But then it clicked. He didn't need truth. He needed a story. Because stories are easier to sell than facts when people are already embarrassed. So I did what my attorney told me to do. I didn't respond emotionally. I responded strategically. I screenshotted Chris's threat and forwarded it to my lawyer. Then I texted Lena and said, "He's threatening me. Save everything." Lena replied, "He's threatening me too." Of course he was. Within hours, the smear campaign started. First, it was subtle. A cousin messaged me, "Hey, are you okay? Heard you're taking this badly." Taking this badly, like I was the problem. Then Rachel's mom posted a vague status about men who abandon pregnant wives. She didn't tag me, but she didn't have to. Then I got a call from my own mother. My mom's voice was strained. "Nate," she said. Rachel's mom called me. My stomach tightened. What did she say? My mom hesitated. She said, "You've been emotionally harsh for years." She said you pushed Rachel away. There it was, the classic rewrite. The betrayed spouse becomes the reason the cheating happened. I exhaled slowly. Mom, I said, Rachel cheated with her sister's husband. I know, my mom said quickly. I'm just telling you what they're saying. I nodded even though she couldn't see it. They're trying to make me the villain so they don't have to face what happened, I said. My mom was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Do you have proof? Proof. The word adults use when they're trying to protect you but also trying to protect themselves from social embarrassment. Yes, I said. Lena has screenshots. I have some too. My mom exhaled. Okay, she said. Then don't argue. Just keep your head. I hung up and sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel again like I was stuck in that same Tuesday. Then my phone buzzed. Rachel. A long message. She wrote, Chris is saying you'll ruin his life. Please don't. He's scared. I'm scared. We can handle this privately. Privately. The word that always means, let us control the damage. I replied one line. Tell Chris to stop contacting me. Rachel didn't respond. Then Chris tried a new tactic. He sent me a voice note. I didn't want to listen. But I did, because if he was threatening something, I needed to know. His voice was low and shaky, like he was trying to sound remorseful. Nate, he said, I know you're angry. I get it. But you're not innocent in all this. You know things about Lena that would destroy her. Don't pretend you're some saint. I felt my stomach drop. He was trying to plant a false equivalence, make it sound like we were both hiding something. I forwarded the voice note to my attorney and didn't respond. Then Lena called me crying. He told my parents I'm infertile, she said, voice shaking. He told them I can't give him a family, and that's why he fell into a mistake. I felt rage surge. That's not his story to tell, I said. Lena sobbed. He's trying to make me the reason, and Mom is listening. So now Chris wasn't just destroying me and Rachel. He was destroying Lena too. And the ugliest part was watching the family system scramble to find a narrative where the men weren't monsters and the women weren't humiliated. The next day, Chris's mother, the one who always hugged me at holidays, called me. Her voice was calm, rehearsed. Nate, she said, I want you to know we're praying for everyone. This is a hard situation. Hard situation. Again. I said, It's not hard. It's betrayal. She sighed. Chris made a mistake, she said. I couldn't help it. I laughed once, sharp, bitter. A mistake that lasts months and ends in pregnancy, I said. That's a series of choices. She didn't answer that. Instead, she said, Rachel is pregnant. We need to think about the baby. The baby again. Always the baby. The baby as a shield. I said, Then you should tell your son to be a father, I replied. She went quiet, then said, He's not well right now. That was code. Not well equals irresponsible and hiding. I ended the call. That evening, my attorney asked me a question that shifted my focus. Do you want to protect your reputation or do you want to fight? I said, both. He said, then we do it carefully. He advised, no public posts. Only written communication. Keep documentation. Do not discuss paternity publicly until there's formal confirmation to avoid unnecessary legal complications. And if anyone threatened me again, we'd consider restraining steps. Then Lena texted, Chris is saying Rachel will put you on the birth certificate to force you to pay. My stomach dropped. Can she do that? I asked. Lena replied, he thinks so. It might have been ignorance, but it was still terrifying, because even if it was legally wrong, people can attempt messy things in chaos. I immediately called my lawyer. He said, we can prevent that with proper filings, and you should request that any paternity be formally established. Do not sign anything. That night, I finally listened to the last voicemail I hadn't opened, the one from a number I didn't recognize earlier. It was Rachel's dad. His voice was cold. Nate, you're going to ruin Rachel's life. You need to come back and do the right thing. Do the right thing. I stared at my wall and thought, the right thing would have been not sleeping with your daughter's brother-in-law. But I didn't say that. I didn't call him back. Instead, I prepared for what I knew was coming, a family confrontation designed to shame me into silence. And sure enough, 2 days later, Rachel's mom texted, Family meeting, Sunday, 4 p.m. You need to be there. Need. Like it was a court summons. I showed the text to my attorney. He said, "Don't go alone, and don't go if you think it'll become hostile. But if you choose to go, bring a witness, keep it calm and don't debate. State your position and leave." I asked Lena if she planned to go. She said she had to because her parents were pressuring her, and Chris was living in their guest room like a fugitive. That image, Chris hiding in a guest room while everyone pressured me to be supportive, made my blood boil. So yes, I went. I brought Dan again. Witness, calm presence, someone who wouldn't get emotionally manipulated by family. When we walked into Rachel's parents' house, it felt like walking into a trap. Everyone was there. Rachel, her parents, her aunt, my in-laws, and Lena's parents. Chris wasn't in the living room, but I could feel him in the house, like a ghost hiding behind a wall. Rachel's mom started immediately. "Nate, sit." I didn't sit. I stood near the door. "I'm here for 5 minutes," I said calmly. "Say what you need to say." Rachel started crying. Her mom glared at me like I'd caused it. Then her dad said, "You're abandoning your wife." I said, "She cheated with her sister's husband." He snapped, "Stop saying it like that." I stared at him. "That's what it is," I said. Rachel's mom said, "She's pregnant." I said, "And it's not mine." That's when Lena finally walked in from the hallway. Her face was white, jaw clenched. Behind her, Chris appeared looking exhausted, eyes red, acting like he was the victim of a natural disaster rather than the cause of one. Chris said quietly, "Nate." I held up my hand. "No," I said. "You threatened me." Chris flinched. "I didn't threaten." I pulled out my phone and played the voice note, the one where he tried to imply I wasn't innocent. The room went silent. Rachel's mom's mouth tightened. Rachel looked down. Lena's eyes filled with tears, angry tears. Chris's face drained of color. Then, because he couldn't deny it, he tried one last manipulation. He looked at the room and said, "Nate is doing this to punish Rachel. He wants to destroy the baby." Destroy the baby? That was the lowest thing he could say without crossing into truly unforgivable territory. My stomach turned. I said calm and clear, "That's a lie. I will not be a father to a child that isn't mine, and I will not stay married to a woman who betrayed me. That's not punishment. That's reality." Chris opened his mouth to argue. Lena stepped forward. "Shut up," Lena said, voice shaking. Everyone froze. Lena turned to her parents and said, "You're all blaming the wrong person. Chris did this. Rachel did this. Nate didn't." Rachel's mom whispered, "Lena." Lena cut her off. "No," she said, "I'm done." Then she turned and looked at Chris with a kind of disgust that made him shrink. "Get out," she said. "I don't want you in my life." Chris looked around, panicking, then said, "Lena, please." Lena pointed toward the door. "Out." The room exploded into shouting. Rachel cried harder. Her mom tried to calm everyone. Chris tried to speak over Lena. Rachel's dad yelled something about family unity. And I realized this meeting wasn't about solutions. It was about pressure. So I did what my attorney told me. I stated my boundary and left. I looked at Rachel and said, "We will communicate through attorneys." Then I walked out with Dan. As we got into the car, my phone buzzed. A text from Lena. "I'm sorry. I believe you, and I'm filing too." I stared at the message, heart pounding. 2 marriages were ending, 2 families were splitting. And Chris and Rachel had thought they could manage the fallout by controlling me. They were wrong. Because now Lena, the one person they needed silent, was no longer silent. After the family meeting, things moved fast and slow at the same time. Fast emotionally because everyone's feelings were exploding daily. Slow legally because divorce is paperwork and waiting and signatures and "we'll get back to you." The morning after Lena texted, "I'm filing too," I felt an odd mixture of relief and grief. Relief that I wasn't the only one refusing to carry the consequences. Grief that this was real enough to end 2 marriages. I kept my communication strict, only email, only about logistics, and mostly through attorneys. Rachel hated that. She sent long messages anyway, apologies, explanations, guilt. "I'm pregnant and alone." "You're abandoning me." "I'm scared." "You're the only stable person I have." That last line made me stare at my screen. because it was the truth, and that's what made it manipulative. She wasn't saying, "You're my partner," she was saying, "You're my safety net." I didn't respond. My attorney filed for divorce and requested temporary orders to protect assets and keep communication clean. He also advised me very clearly not to sign anything related to paternity and to request formal paternity establishment through the appropriate legal process once the baby was born. I didn't want to talk about paternity in public. I didn't want that child to become gossip, but I also wasn't going to let anyone pressure me into legal responsibility for a situation I didn't create. Meanwhile, Lena's situation became a war zone. She kicked Chris out of their home. Chris moved in with his parents, Rachel moved in with hers. The families started forming camps. Rachel's mother continued to call me heartless. Chris's father tried to talk man to man. People kept using phrases like, "One mistake, the baby is innocent. Don't ruin two families." And I kept repeating one sentence like it was my anchor. I didn't ruin anything. I'm responding to what they did. 2 weeks later, Lena asked to meet me in a public place to exchange documents. When she arrived, she looked like she'd aged 5 years. She slid her phone across the table and said, "More messages." I didn't even want to look, but I did. It was worse than what she'd already shown me, not more explicit, just more cold, more planning, more lies. Chris telling Rachel exactly what to say to me, Rachel reassuring Chris that Nate trusts me. Then a line from Rachel that made my stomach twist. "He's a good man. He'll do the right thing." The right thing, in her mind, meant stay quiet, pay bills, protect her image. Lena's hands were shaking. "My mom keeps saying I should forgive him because divorce looks bad," she whispered. I stared at her. "Your mom is more scared of gossip than betrayal," I said. Lena nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yeah," she said, "and I'm realizing she's always been like that." That was an unexpected side effect of this whole disaster. It exposed the family's real values. Not honesty, not loyalty, appearances. Then Chris tried one last power move. He filed a complaint with my workplace HR, claiming I had been harassing him and making threats. It was ridiculous, but it forced a meeting. HR asked if there was any truth to it. I handed them the text where he threatened to expose me, and the voice note where he tried to imply I was hiding something. HR's tone shifted immediately. They documented it and told me to keep everything in writing and avoid any direct contact. Chris thought he could smear me into silence. He didn't realize I was documenting everything like my life depended on it because in a way it did. Around this time, Rachel tried a new angle. She asked to meet me alone for closure. My attorney advised against it. So I replied through email, "No in-person meetings, communication through counsel only." Rachel responded with, "You're punishing me." I didn't reply. Because here's the truth, no one wanted to admit. Consequences feel like punishment when you're used to being protected. 3 months later, Lena got a temporary order in her divorce process that limited Chris's access to shared assets because he'd been moving money around trying to prepare for 2 divorces at once. Yes, he tried to protect himself financially while emotionally wrecking 2 women. Rachel's divorce with me was simpler because we didn't have kids and our assets were straightforward. The main tension point was the narrative. Rachel wanted me to be supportive. She wanted language in our paperwork that implied mutual separation rather than infidelity. My attorney asked me what I wanted. I said, truth, not revenge. Truth. So we included the relevant facts. Rachel cried in mediation. She said, "I never meant to hurt him." I sat there and said, "Calm, but you did." Repeatedly. The mediator asked if there was any possibility of reconciliation. I said no. Rachel said she wanted it. I didn't. That was the first time I watched Rachel realize she couldn't charm her way into undoing consequences. The baby was born several months later. I'm not going into identifying details. But yes, paternity was formally established through legal channels, and the results confirmed what we already knew. I was not the father. Chris was. That confirmation mattered because it ended the last pressure tactic Rachel's family was holding on to, the idea that they could guilt me into stepping up. Once Chris was legally established as the father, the narrative shifted again. Suddenly, the same people who called me heartless started calling Chris a monster. The hypocrisy was almost impressive. And here's what happened to Chris socially. He lost everything he thought he could keep. His marriage to Lena ended. His reputation in the family tanked. His parents were furious but still tried to manage the scandal. Some friends cut him off. But the most brutal consequence wasn't social. It was internal. He had to live with the fact that he blew up his life for something he didn't even commit to. He didn't choose Rachel. He used her and ran back to Lena until Lena threw him out. Rachel also didn't get the happy ending she imagined. Chris didn't move in and become her partner. He didn't post "love wins." He didn't marry her. Rachel became a single mother in a family that judged her quietly while pretending to support her publicly. And yes, I feel sympathy for the child because children don't deserve adult chaos. But sympathy doesn't mean self-sacrifice. Now, where am I? I'm divorced. I'm in therapy. I'm rebuilding friendships. I'm learning how to trust myself again after the kind of betrayal that makes you question whether you ever knew anyone. Lena and I aren't friends, but we are aligned. We check in occasionally. We shared a catastrophe. That bonds you in a strange way. Sometimes I still wake up and for half a second I forget. Then it hits again, but it hits softer now, less like a knife, more like a bruise healing. So here's my Aita question. Aita for leaving my wife immediately after learning she was pregnant with her sister's husband and refusing to be supportive through the pregnancy? Because people keep framing it as, a pregnant woman needs support. And I agree in general. But the person responsible for supporting her is not the betrayed spouse she lied to. It's the father. And it's the family she chose to protect her lies. I didn't abandon a pregnant wife. I left a marriage that was already destroyed. I just refused to pretend it wasn't. So, Aita for leaving immediately and not staying to support my wife through a pregnancy that wasn't mine? What would you do in my position? Subscribe for more Reddit-style long stories.